and welcome again to Gavin's Beer and Brewing. So today I'm making a Hefeweizen and I'm going to be doing a double decoction mash. So a lot of arguments at the moment in the homebrewing circles about whether decoctions are worthwhile, and there's certainly a lot more work involved. I think that for a Hefeweizen, it's such a malt-forward beer that it really is worth the effort. And also, I'm going to try and demonstrate today that it's fun. It's really hands-on brewing, and it might add an hour or two to your brew day, but I think it's worth the effort. Here is my mash schedule for today. So I'm going to mash in at 40 degrees, raise the whole mash to 50 degrees. Then there's going to be an acid rest. So from here on, the dotted line is the rest mash, whereas the solid line is the decoction. So I pull a first decoction, a saccharification rest, then up to a vigorous boil for 20 minutes. Return the decoction to the rest mash, leave it at 63. Pull the second decoction. The second decoction goes up to 71 degrees for 10 minutes. Then boil that vigorously for 20 minutes. Then return the second decoction to, so that the whole mash comes to 72 degrees. Then up to a mash out of 77. Time to pull the first decoction. So I've got this huge aluminium pan, which is ideal, because the decoctions need to be big. Usually you hear 30 or, in here the recipe says 30 to 40% of the mash. I hope I'm going to manage that. That's partly so that the decoction has its effects in terms of the boiling the grains and all that sort of stuff. But also, if you have a big enough decoction, when you add it back into the mash, it should get you to the next temperature step that you're looking for. Anyway. So you want the decoction to be thick. So scooping the grains from the bottom and leaving as much water as possible in the as much wort as possible in here. Don't worry too much about the grains sticking to the bottom in the decoction pan, because to start with, when you heat it, you're going to be stirring pretty constantly. But then when it gets to the boil, the grains will have broken down and more liquid will have been released. So you'll still need to stir it, but it won't be the problem you're anticipating. So here's the first decoction. I'm going to stir it a lot whilst I heat it. And the first rest is going to be at 71 degrees. Okay, so I've reached the saccharification temperature, namely 71 degrees. For the first decoction, so what I'm going to do is wrap it up and see if I can maintain that temperature for about 10 minutes, and then I'll take it up to the boil. Right, so here is the first decoction. It's just reached the boil. I'm going to put the lid on it because I want it to boil as hot as I can. I'm not going to go away though, because I'm still concerned about it sticking to the bottom, so I'll be having a look inside every minute or two to check what's going on. Okay, the first decoction has had its 20-minute boil now, so I'm going to return it to the main mash. The recipe says to do this over 10 minutes. I'm not sure I have the patience for that, but it might take me that long anyway. More importantly though, I've managed quite a big decoction, so I need to make sure that when I return this to the main mash, I don't exceed the temperature I'm looking for, which is 63 degrees. So it's going to be a lot of spooning and mixing and thermometer reading for the next 10 minutes or so. So keeping the oxygen out as much as possible. Just gently introducing it back into the liquid. So, as predicted, the reintroduction of the decoction into the main mash has got me to almost exactly where I needed to be. I was looking for 63, and I'm pretty much there. Okay, time to pull the second decoction. So this decoction is going to be slightly smaller. It's going to be a third of the mash rather than 40%. And we're going to raise it to 71 degrees and hold for 10 minutes and then take it to the boil. So this is the second decoction on the right after the boil, and on the left is the main mash, which, as you can see, is lighter and has much more liquid in it. I've reintroduced the second decoction to the main mash. I've raised it to 71 and then to 77. It's at 77, which is the mash out temperature. I'm now going to transfer the mash to my mash tun, namely a big cool box with a false bottom. So look at the colour of the mash at this point. It's a fantastic dark rich red. Okay, it's a slow sparge. But of course it's a slow sparge. Right, so we've got something like 3/4 of the grain bill is wheat. I'm not using any rice hulls. I'm sure the decoctions have made a difference, but it's going to be a slow sparge. Right, here's a tip. So usually when you sparge, as soon as you've covered the elements, you can turn them on and get going. Well, do not do that with Hefeweizen. I did it once, and what happens is the wort at this stage is super viscose, and it just burns onto the elements, and then you just get and the burnt flavour goes through the beer, and it's horrible, 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 horrible. So, as with many things with the Hefeweizen, this requires patience. Okay, skimming the trub. Right, it's a 90-minute boil, so I finally have time for some lunch. Okay, 60 minutes hop edition. It's 50 grams of Hallertauer Mittelfrüh, which is 4.2%. And that's the only hops that'll be going in. Okay, so I've boiled for 90 minutes and I've chilled the wort down to the coolest I could manage with tap water, which is about 25 degrees. However, what I want to do is pitch the wort at about 11 degrees. The thinking here is that with Hefeweizen, the pitching temperature of the yeast added to the fermenting temperature should come to 30 degrees. And what I'm doing is I've filled the cool box with ice and I've got a pump there and I'm running that through the wort chiller. Time to pitch the yeast. The yeast is Wyeast Weihenstephan, and I've made a starter. So it's said that one of the ways that you can increase the banana aroma in Hefeweizen is to underpitch the yeast. To be honest, I've never had a problem with too little banana. It's usually too much banana. So I'm going to pitch lots because I really want it to get going. Okay, job done. So here they are in the fermentation chamber. So that gauge is reading 15.3, which is credible and which I'll take. I would have liked a bit less, but I'm going to raise the temperature now to 18 degrees and hopefully it'll get pretty active in the next few hours. Hello and welcome to the tasting. So, first of all, I'd like to introduce my friend Chris.
Hello.
He's come along today to give us his expert opinion on this brew. Thank you, Chris, and cheers. Right, so what do you think, Chris?
It's extremely smooth. I mean, you know, you're used to tasting people's homebrew efforts and they're gassy and everything. But that is outstanding, I would say.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I
could quite happily drink that all afternoon.
It's well, I warn you now. It's quite strong,
Yes.
Perhaps deceptively so.
But definitely hints of fruit in there.
Right. Oh, this is another issue. Bavarian wheat beer is famous for its banana and its cloves. In my experience, when you're making it, you end up with too much banana and too much cloves. So I've tried to balance it, mainly by not fermenting too high, fermenting at 18 degrees. You can go up to maybe 22, 23. And yeah, obviously I pitched a substantial amount of yeast. So, how much banana? Enough? Too much?
No, it's subtle. I mean, it's not in your face.
And as I say, 5.3%. That's too much. I don't know.
That's bright strength for a base beer, surely.
Well, actually, now might be the time to make a comparison because I brought along a bottle of the Franciscaner to make a direct comparison.
The commercial one has more bite, I would say.
It has more hops.
That's not necessarily a good or a bad thing.
But yeah, there's a combination of things. One thing is that the Franciscana is a bit more hoppy. Another thing is, remember I was saying that it finished quite high, so this is quite sweet and quite full-bodied. This is much drier. So that sort of tang, that sort of zestiness, you get all the way through, right from the start, right to the end, don't you?
It does last, yeah.
And that combines with the banana. That's fantastic. I will say one other advantage of making this stuff as opposed to buying it is that it's fresh. Generally speaking, as soon as it's ready to go, that's when it's at its best. So, thank you, Chris, for coming along.
You're welcome.
And saying such nice things about my beer. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Gavin's Beer and Brewing. Cheers.